Hey, Mr. Howard here with the next set of videos on a novel I'm reading, my novel that's being published this summer, Faraday's Mirror. Last time we read two chapters. We read chapter 2, A Very Victorian Warning, and chapter 3, Plans on Ice. And so I thought I'd do a quick analysis segment, sort of as an author, what are some of the things I'm doing in those sections, the themes I'm sort of bringing out and stuff like that. And then I'll record the next few chapters and I'll upload them all for you online. So, chapter 2, A Very Victorian Warning. We had the initiating event back in chapter 1. Byron knocks his picture off, and inside are the plans to the Faraday mirror, which we're going to find out here in chapter 2. So it's sort of a continuation of that. I cut at a climactic moment. We have these plot structures in... sorry, I just lost my spot. We have these plot structures in place. And traditionally, books back in the day, they used to have essentially the same plot wave for every chapter. That every chapter would have its own mini sort of initiating event, and then it would go through rising action, have climax, and then go to falling action. But in modern novels, because the goal is to keep readers hooked and keep readers reading, that plot structure has been cut differently. It tends to cut at climactic moments rather than have falling action as part of the chapter. And so, I cut chapter 1 right where Cole discovers the plans and starts reading them. And so, we're left sort of on this cliffhanger, and we move into chapter 2 and sort of pick up right where we left off. It's called A Very Victorian Warning because we get a warning from their ancestor, Charles Wheatstone, about the dangers of making the Faraday mirror. And there's some stuff in there. I wrote this letter and had Byron read it, and it's written in sort of a different voice, an older English voice. So you get a information. But this is still all sort of exposition that's folded in here. We find out that the Faraday mirror was invented, that Englishmen went through, and that some of them didn't come back, that Queen Victoria, for whatever reason, shut down the project and had the plans destroyed, but that Wheatstone left them. And so we're getting all this sort of exposition stuff. We're also getting nice amounts of illusion. I tried to use a lot of illusion in the story, and both of these chapters rely on illusion to sort of set the stage. So we get names of famous British scientists. Those are sort of Easter eggs. You can follow those down their own individual rabbit holes and find out who they are. But some of them are going to be important. Obviously, Faraday's in the title. He's a really famous British scientist. Babbage is the guy who we call the father of computers because he invented essentially the first computer in the Victorian age. Ada Lovelace is a famous... She worked with Babbage, so she's often called the mother of computing. Her father was Lord Byron, a famous poet who I teach in my classes, so it's kind of fun to have her in there. So I get their names in there, and that's kind of cool. And we get this warning that has an allusion to Adam and Eve and the idea of knowledge, and the dangers of knowledge, that maybe knowledge overall, though, has been a bonus to human society rather than a detractor, but that there's always a danger in getting that. And that's obviously going to be sort of thematic a little bit in the story. Every coming-of-age story has that loss of innocence tie-in somewhere, and I'm trying to work that tie-in here early on. So we continue sort of developing the brothers as their contrasting personalities and their contrasting relationships. Throughout this, you see Cole's, interest in science. He's immediately convinced that he can remake this Faraday mirror. We get a little bit of his backstory. He wants to go to Harvard, but he's been rejected despite his qualifications, and he thinks making this is going to get him into Harvard. You get sort of his disdain for the local university, which is a little harsh because, let's be honest, his dad teaches there, his brother wants to go there, and he thinks of it as sort of beneath him. So you get the sense that Cole is a little bit arrogant and very ambitious. And I'm trying to lay that characterization of him down early on. He's the one who's after knowledge, is seeking for it on sort of a grand scale. So we get some of those things going on. We get a little bit of backstory about Byron and how he hid his math textbook and cheated and got all the answers. So you get a sense that he's willing to bend and break the rules for his own benefit, but he felt guilty about it, and so he's got a conscience. And so again, just a lot of characterization in there. So then chapter 3, Plans on Ice, brings in a new character that we didn't really meet before. We're meeting Byron and Cole's mom, Felicity. So one of the things I chose to do in the novel, which hopefully works, is I decided to make the family sort of an interracial marriage family, and so the two boys are biracial. Their mom's of African descent, and their dad is of English descent. I wanted to do this for a number of reasons. Obviously, I'm Caucasian. My wife's Caucasian. So you could argue that I'm not writing my own voice, that this is, me appropriating, somebody else's voice or culture. But the truth is, I teach school, and I have a lot of students who are biracial in my classroom, and you don't see their voices in stories. And I want this story to be inclusive. I want it to be interesting, and I wanna reach out to boys, and I want to capture the interest of as many boys as I can. It's a great story for girls too. Don't get me wrong, and there's some powerful girl characters coming. Don't worry. But I have two sons, and the story's written about brothers. So anyway, I think it's important, and also it's an American story. It's about America, and even though it's set in 1996, like I always say in class, a story is about the time in which it is set, but it's also about the time and the experience of the author who's writing it. And so it's set in New England, where I grew up. But I've come down here to Virginia, and I've seen things that never even occurred to me when I was up in New England, and I've grown and expanded, and some of that stuff comes across in the story. But we introduce Felicity as a character, and Felicity's a really important character. Moms are enormously important, especially to brothers, her sons, and so we get the sense Cole gets his scientific inclination from her, but also I'm trying to make her a sympathetic character and make the boy's life a little more sympathetic. So you find out that she has lupus, and that she's facing this autoimmune disease that has a very bad prognosis, and that the kids are trying to deal with that just as she is. And so I think that lends a little sympathy to her character. And as somebody who is married to a woman who has kidney failure and a kidney transplant, that's an experience that's very genuine to me. And so anyway, I've got her in there, and we introduce her, and we introduce the family. We also get some more allusions in here. It turns out that Byron is more like his dad. He's interested in history. He's been studying Victorian history, which dovetails with when the Faraday's mirror was made, and those sorts of things. He's learning about Victorian disasters, some hints about the British military and the imperial structure, which are going to be important later. I'm sort of seeding things that are coming up towards the end of the story. We also get a quick reference to Alice in Wonderland, which is, of course, a portal fiction story, and that connects with what's going to happen here. So we're overlaying some of those. The idea of Wonderland is going to be important going forward. So we get all that kind of stuff. A shout out to Jumanji, which is the title of the next chapter. They drive by the movie theater. We're going to see that. But of course, Jumanji's plot is similar in structure in some ways to the plot that I'm writing here. And so, that's something that I want to make a connection to. That's another allusion. So we have allusions to the Bible, going all the way back to Adam and Eve. We have allusions to Victorian history and Victorian events and Victorian literature, and then we have allusions to 1990s America, and we're trying to interweave all of these things and make a believable sort of backstory and world and family. So then we see Byron in his natural element. We've seen Cole working with computers and seen his competence, his incredible competence with technology. The goal now is to show you Byron and his competence with athletics. Again, I'm trying to reach a broad net here and connect with as many kids as I can. I want those kids who are academically inclined to read this story, but I also want those kids who have academic challenges like Byron's dyslexia to read the story, or who are primarily athletic and don't consider themselves to be enormously academic to find a character in the story that they relate to. And of course, I've got two sons, one of whom is dyslexic and one of whom is incredibly academically advanced. And these kids are not exactly my sons in any stretch of the imagination. They're their own characters. They reflect, elements of me and my brothers growing up, and they're sort of an amalgam of various parts. But my dog's making weird noises over on the other side of the room. But anyway, so I try to get that in there. We see Byron playing hockey. We get the sense that he's an incredible hockey player. He's got really, really incredible reflexes. So that's important and going to play in here as well. We also get the idea of Byron being somebody who has a really strong work ethic. He calls himself a grinder. He works hard to achieve, and he's not interested necessarily in fame. So we get a juxtaposition or a contrast between Byron and what he wants in his life and what he's willing to work for and how he's willing to work for it, and Cole. Cole wants to be the best, and he wants everybody else to know it. He wants to do great things. He's ambitious, but he's ambitious in a sense that he wants to be proud and grow and to see the world see his achievements. Whereas Byron, he's more interested in growing to be the best for the sake of being the best, that he knows that he did it. It's not about everybody else seeing it. That doesn't matter to him. And so you have these sort of dueling philosophies in the brothers themselves, developing as separate characters. And that's sort of where chapter 3 ends. And so hopefully I've done that and you've seen that as you're reading the story. I'm going to sign off here and I'm going to read you chapter 4 and chapter 5. And then I'll come back with another little segment like this after those are done. Hope you're enjoying these. Drop me a comment if you want. Drop me a like, whatever. Stay healthy and stay safe, everyone.